My major beef with most of the YouTube channels these days is the fact that everyone is trying to sell you something, and especially with photography channels, everyone's talking about the latest and greatest features and gadgets that are available in the market today. Sadly, no one is really talking about how much fun photography can be and how meaningful it can be to anyone who's passionate about it. In this particular presentation, I'd like to show most of the beginner photographers or those who'd like to get into photography that one, you don't need a fancy camera to get into the hobby or make a career out of it. When I was starting out back in the late 1970s, I had to learn on an all manual and all mechanical camera, which did not even have a proper light meter like we have today. None of the evaluative or matrix metering systems, and totally none of that. And every shot, you had to be conscientious about it. You had to make every shot of film count. So that's my background in as far as photography is concerned. I started out that way, and as I transitioned into digital photography, I more or less carried over a lot of the lessons that I learned back in the film photography days. Now, for this video, I'd like to acknowledge my cousin Charles Villoria for this beautifully preserved Canon Rebel T2i. I think it's practically brand new considering, and this is what we're making the demonstration on. For this particular video, I'd like to make you, as a beginner or even as a seasoned photographer, just simply rethink your priorities when it comes to photography. And I think these tips would be most useful to the beginning photographer, but it might apply to everyone. The first thing I do with any camera, especially an electronic camera, is turn off the audible beep. It's so annoying to hear a focus confirmation with that beeping sound. Now, like I said in a previous video, like whenever you turn on the beep, you're teaching your ears to focus. That's a very serious mistake. Your eyes should learn to focus and not your ears. And that's what the beep does whenever you turn it on. Now, the second tip for everyone to use the semi-automatic modes. Now, on a Canon DSLR, you have a choice of the AV, which is aperture value, and the TV, which is time value. Now, AV or aperture value simply means aperture priority on a Nikon system and aperture priority on a Canon system, which means that all you need to do is set your aperture and the camera would basically pick the best shutter speed for the job. Conversely, when you use TV or time value, or for the Nikon system, the shutter priority, the camera will pick the best aperture based on the shutter speed that you set. Now, using the semi-automatic modes of any camera will help you learn at least a little more about photography than just leaving everything to chance or leaving everything for the camera to decide. At least you'll know which apertures are best for you, which apertures will give you the best depth of field, and which shutter speeds will help you blur or freeze an image depending on what effect that you want. Now, if you're the kind of person who would like to shoot strictly on manual mode, an added insurance for you would be to set the camera on auto ISO. This means that you would still be in some sort of a semi-automatic mode. You pick your aperture, you pick your shutter speed, but the camera will pick the best ISO for that particular shot that you're trying to make. So in a way, it's an insurance policy that you use the settings that you want, but at the same time still get a properly exposed image. So it's as simple as that. The next quick tip is the back button focus. Now, most DSLRs have this particular feature, and what it is using the autofocus mode on any camera, activating the autofocus mode not with the shutter release button, but with a button situated at the back of the camera. So as you can see, the camera is focusing or looking for the focus point, not with the shutter release button. So what that does for you is you can set your exposure or auto exposure and independently set your focus. So that way, every time you press the shutter release button, you're not changing your focus in any way. So the focus and the exposure are independent of each other. Simply put, you use the shutter release button half press for exposure and you use the back button to find your focus. And lastly, and I think one of the most important settings on any camera is to turn off the playback. This should prevent anyone from chimping. That means that you're not looking at your exposures with each click that you take, meaning you have to make a deliberate effort to look at your LCD screen when you want to or not after each shot that you take. This is a discipline that I had back in the days of film. There was no way to review your work, no way to review that exposure except via Polaroid back. So why not do the same thing when you're shooting a digital camera? So you take a shot and you keep shooting until you finally decide that you want to see what you've got. It's as simple as that. Just prevent the chimping thing, because when you chimp, you might be missing out on any subsequent shots that might have been better than your previous shot. So just keep clicking away and decide when you're going to review or play back your photos on the screen. It's as simple as that. Now you get to pick or you get to take the best shots possible without missing anything simply because you were chimping around. Now, if you were doing advertising or portrait photography or anything or any studio setup, then maybe that's an exception. But even when I shoot product shots or when I shoot portraits, I keep clicking away until I finally decide that I want to see what I got. Or maybe I take some test exposures first and just continuously shoot during the entire session and play back when I want it, not after each shot. As a photographer who's been at it for over 4 decades, these are the tips, these are the techniques that have been working well for me so far, whether it's as a hobby or during my professional life. These techniques have made me a better photographer, and hopefully it should make you a better photographer yourself. Remember, if you're not shooting film, photography these days doesn't cost you much. So just keep shooting. That's about it for now. I'm Direct Abs, the Shuttermaniac, and as always, make serendipity happen.